Let me tell you, PuckPedia, stats, contracts, and caps, it's all there for you. One-stop shop for your hockey information. It's a hockey sensation, so log on, log on, log on. If you give a puck, go to PuckPedia.com.
Welcome, episode 1 of PuckPedia Cap Central. It's Keith Kavanaugh. We have the founder of PuckPedia, Hart Levine. Hart, how are you doing?
Doing great. Let's go Jays.
Hart wanted this episode to be exclusively just Toronto Blue Jays talk, which is fine, I guess, for a lot of the Canadian listeners. But I think some of the American listeners would like to hear some hockey talk, unfortunately. So I think we're going to have to get into some hockey stuff.
Yeah, we'll do the Jays talk on Cap Central after dark, like the extra programming later.
I love it. We'll run this one super long, just like you wanted, right? You said at least 30 minutes. Like you said, probably hopefully 2-3 hours is kind of what you wanted on this episode.
That's right. And then we get into Jays talk, and can Jimenez hit in Game 6?
I love it. But yeah, so to wrap this back up, so we're starting a new show today. We have PuckPedia Cap Central. If you haven't been aware, if you haven't been watching, PuckPedia, myself, Hart, we've been working together to kind of get a lot of video content out for the fans, for you guys, because a lot of the contract stuff and the salary cap, like PuckPedia is obviously an incredible resource, but we want to find a way to use video content to describe some of these situations, some of this topical NHL news that's happening right now, but also, get some interactive, some Q&A, build a good community. And we have the PuckPedia Hockey Show that comes out every week. If you're subscribed to the YouTube, you've seen it there. Hart's been posting the clips on Twitter. We've been posting it on Instagram as well. As you can see in the bottom right corner, all our socials at PuckPedia. That's where you're kind of getting this content. But we wanted to come up with a new show. And so this is more of like a live version. Me and Hart kind of going back and forth, picking some topics to talk about. We have the salary cap expert in the building live on camera. So I think that's kind of what we wanted here. We wanted the other show is like more interview style, kind of breaks down people in media, agents, executives, kind of fun stories, them talking, through some contract negotiations. This is more topical. This is more NHL focused. And we thought Thursday at 3 p.m., no one has work or anything right now. So good time to get things going. And we want to thank our friends at CoolBet who are presenting this show. If you go to puckpedia.com/CoolBet, you can get in on the action today. Stay cool and bet responsibly. How's that for an intro, Hart? Does that sound good to you?
Nailed it.
Perfect.
You nailed it like David Schneider on the first pitch of the game.
There we go. And then Vladdy Jr. on the third pitch, right?
Exactly.
But all right, cool. Let us get into some NHL stuff. So I think the first thing that we wanted to talk about today was the 3 mega contract extensions that were just signed over the last few days. We're going to talk about the one first that just got signed a couple of hours ago, and that's Martin Necas. He signed for an 8 years, $11.5 million cap hit contract extension with the Colorado Avalanche that will kick in starting next season. He currently has 13 points in 11 games this year. He had 83 in 79 games last year. If you take a look at the contract structure, right? So a lot of the people on social media are posting, the term and the AAV or the total value. But maybe where we can provide a different angle is the contract structure that he has, the clauses in his contract. So it's pretty heavy signing bonus, this deal. I think it's over $60 million in signing bonus. So not as much base salary. He has a full no move clause in years 1 through 7, and then a 15-year no trade clause in year 8. Hart, do you want to talk about this contract a little bit, the specifics, and maybe we can bring like a 2026 UFA class twist to this, or also a Mikko Rantanen twist to this? I'll let you kind of go whichever direction you want.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. If you ask people on paper, would you rather have Rantanen at 12 or Necas at 11.5? I think most people would say Rantanen, and it's just interesting how it all unfolded. It looks like, in the reporting from last year, they didn't get too close on contract talks with Rantanen. They had some initial asks, but they didn't, I guess from Rantanen's side, it sounds like they didn't really dig into it. They didn't think they were really, it's either take this deal or we're going to trade you. Again, I think in hindsight, both sides would have been happy with Rantanen staying for $12 million, but that's how things work out. And I think, again, last year at this time, thinking that Necas is going to sign for 11.5 would have sounded crazy. But when you look at the contracts that have come since and where we're going, I think 11.5 is like what his market value was. if he continues another season like he's been having last year and on this year and finishes like, let's say 90 points, like that, he's going to be in that range, give or take a little bit. One thing to point out too is, some people are saying, well, he got 8 years now, but in the summer, if he went to free agency, he could only get 6 with the new term limits. That's actually not correct. The term limit changes don't come into effect until next September. So like a Necas, he could sign for 8 years with Colorado, or on July 1st, he could sign for 7 years with another team. So there's not that 2-year difference. So yeah, I mean, I think, looking at the contract structure, that's something we should talk about. Like very heavy signing bonuses. We've seen some teams that don't do that. It really is like, especially for a big player, big signing, it's kind of the cost of doing business. The reasons why players want signing bonuses are, first of all, they get the money sooner. Who wouldn't want to get, $8 million on July 1st versus having to wait a whole year to get that 8 million? I mean, God,
Time value of money, right?
imagine all the things you could buy with the 8 million for those few months sooner. But everyone wants the money sooner. You can invest it. You can, so let's just say the difference between getting 8 million on July 1st or getting it kind of over the year, you could earn a decent amount of interest on that. So there is like some real cash value to the players. The other big ones, though, are signing bonuses cannot be bought out. So that's not really an issue like the first few years of a contract. But you really, when we put out contract structures, you should always put your eye towards the last couple of years of the contract and if there's signing bonuses. So a guy like Necas here, he has almost all signing bonuses in the last year. So this contract is basically could never be bought out because the signing bonuses can't be bought out. You're only buying out the salary, and there's really like no benefit then to the buyout. Whereas we see other contracts, it could even have lots of signing bonuses early, but the last 1 or 2 years maybe doesn't have any signing bonuses, and that makes it a little more possible or maybe likely that it's bought out in those years. And then just the final piece, we have labor piece for now, but typically contracts are structured with signing bonuses when the CBA is potentially ending, because if there's a lockout, the signing bonuses still do get paid. It's the salaries that are missed. So that's why if a player had their way, they would want it like all signing bonus, which is the league minimum salary. For a team perspective, I mean, I personally don't really see why a team would be against signing bonuses. I guess it's like some leverage, and you can then when you do give it, it's like a big deal. But really, I mean, assuming the team has enough money to pay the 8 million on July 1st versus later in the year, what's it to them like how it's divvied out? Other than again, like the potential buyout proof portion of it, like towards the end of the contract. But we could compare like a Logan Cooley's deal to a Marty Necas's deal. Let's say for those first 5 years, like there's really no benefit to Utah not having any signing bonuses in there, but that's what they decided to do. In those last 2 years, definitely not having signing bonuses is an advantage. It makes that contract, if it ever came to it, potentially able to be bought out.
Yeah, and I think to your point too, like even like the Winnipeg Jets, for example, were a team that was heavy against signing bonus. And then you look at the Kyle Connor deal, and he was able to kind of get some. And it was a big deal that they had kind of given in to give some signing bonus. So I think to your point, leverage is a big part of it. But then also too, if you look at this deal, a couple questions I have is like, do you think kind of Colorado maybe, I don't want to say miscalculated, but maybe thought, like you said, that they could get like Necas for an 8 times $9 million, and that they didn't want to pay Rantanen, $3 million. They didn't want to pay that extra $3 million. They thought they can get a pretty, comparable player for better value. And then you saw some of the contracts that were signed over the summer and leading into the season. And then that kind of became the market value, unfortunately. And they obviously would probably rather Rantanen at 12 versus Necas at 11.5.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like, did they miscalculate, or did they couldn't get a deal done with him at earlier at a lower number? But I certainly think like if Necas signs this deal on July 1st, like this summer, it's probably for less, right? Because agents were certainly looking at it, and people like me that's like look at this with the cap increasing, we're expecting these much higher contracts. The teams were still, I guess maybe wishful thinking a little bit that it wouldn't jump like as a percentage of the cap, all the contracts, there would be a little bit of like clawback from that. So while players were going to get a raise, if the cap's going up 9%, it wouldn't be like a straight kind of 9% goes along. But as we saw deals get done, over the summer and recently, obviously like those numbers are getting closer to where they should be, you would think. And that brings a Necas deal. Like now he's looking at this universe of comparables out there, and next summer thinking like, yeah, of course I'm going to be in the 11, maybe even higher. so because if you compare it even to like we should say if you compare it to a Marner and a Rantanen, it is 1 year later. The cap is going to be about 9, maybe 10% higher. So it's not like a straight, Rantanen at 12 versus Necas at 11 and a half. Because like if Rantanen signed his deal next summer, that's like probably 13, like
Yeah,
as a percentage of the cap. So we should say in fairness that, to keep
they're
that in
not the
mind.
same.
No, they're not. But again, I do think that it's fair to say if he had signed this extension on July 1st, it would be for less than now. And to your question though, we can't say maybe Colorado was offering something pretty close and he didn't want to go for it and he wanted to see the market, which I think would be a wise move. We don't really know. But I think what we can say is winding all the way back to when Rantanen was traded. That to me looks like a miscalculation that you could have got Rantanen for less than maybe you feared. And Necas is more than you probably thought he would be when you made that trade.
Yeah, now we're going to look at the 2026 UFA class, and it's pretty nuked now in terms of like star talent available. I mean, who didn't sign a contract extension in the last 2 months? Every single top UFA has basically, as Chris Johnson, your friend from the Blue Jays game, had posted, Kaprizov, Eichel, Kyle Connor, Necas have all signed these 8-year extensions. And I know he mentioned that they wouldn't be able to in the future due to the CBA, and you just mentioned that actually doesn't take place till next September. But an interesting wrinkle there. We know McDavid also signed his deal. And so now we're looking at Artemi Panarin as like the top UFA. So maybe that this summer isn't going to be as interesting and as entertaining as fans would like. But, teams are also they're flush with cap space. And so they're able to kind of get these deals done and keep players that they want to keep, these high-end star players and in their own teams.
Yeah, I mean the ones for me that I circle, like I'm really interested to see what happens, both because I think they'd be very sought after on July 1st, and maybe there's a chance that they're not going to resign, and that would be Alex Tuck and Adrian Kempe, because like both those guys are like real difference makers. They're not, I don't know if they're superstars, but very in the very very good player category. Tuck, I think, from Buffalo, or from the area, but doesn't seem like necessarily going to be signing right away, given what's going on there. And then Kempe, it seems like he wants to be in LA. That's what you hear, but that's another one where like, well, then why hasn't he signed yet by now? And again, maybe it's just getting the numbers together. But I think those two would be really interesting, because if you look at the rest of the UFA class, which I have open here, like they're all in their 30s, right? The top guys are all in their 30s. Those guys are, they'll be turning 30 next year, so they're still getting like a few more prime years. Even a guy like Nick Schmaltz, I think, will be interesting to see, what he does. But like a Panarin, you're expecting he's not going to perform like he has over the last few years. And then you go down to like John Carlson, great defenseman, but not, he's 35 already. Malkin, now you're getting down into like a Jaden Schwartz or
Point per game, Malkin, by the way, might I add.
yeah. But it's the age, I'd say, right?
No, I
So
know.
that's why I think like if you're talking really, really good players who can really move the needle and are going to be signing like at 30 or less, to me, it's like you got to keep that eye on Kempe and Tuck. Those are the two to really watch.
Definitely. And it sounds like LA and Kempe are kind of making some progress. Tuck, I haven't heard too much movement on that side of things. So we'll see how that all plays out kind of in the summer and as the season progresses. But let's talk about these other two extensions real quick on the flip side of things. Couple of younger players, right, that just got extended. So we have Thomas Harley, who also got like some signing bonus plus base in his deal, a little front loaded. He was at 8 years, $10.587 million cap hit. Obviously, and I think it's interesting to point out, you're not able to do trade clauses in RFA years. So that's why his no move clauses don't kick in until years 4 through 8. I think some people were confused why these deals wouldn't have them 1 through 8. And that's kind of the main reason why. But just another really stud kind of player, 24 years old, 8 points in 10 games so far this year, 50 and 78 last season. He's coming off of the last year of a $2 by $4 million AAV deal. And he did have arbitration rights this summer. So they did have the player and camp Andy Scott had some leverage there.
Yeah. So just on the contract structure, you see that only has $1 million signing bonus the last 2 years. So again, I certainly wouldn't bet on Cool Bet that Harley's ever going to get bought out, but that contract could be bought out. It wouldn't be prohibitive in those last 2 years. To me, like these big high-end young defensemen are signing for numbers that are a little light. I think those deals, like for Harley, you look at like a Lane Hudson, I think those are going to look like absolute bargains. very soon. Because if you look at like a Noah Dobson, he signed for 9.5 times 8 years and almost all UFA years. So certainly there's a trade-off there. But I mean, who would you rather have, Harley or Dobson? Like, and no offense to Dobson, good player, but Harley, is an Olympian potentially, right? And looked really good at the Four Nations. So, and Hudson, only one like season, but what a season. And also a defenseman that puts up points, which is what gets you paid. To me, that deal was a little light too, and I think certainly played on the fact that he wanted to stay there and leave them a little bit of space potentially in the future to be competitive. And I think kind of got grinded down that didn't want to be a distraction. But like if I was sitting here on my spreadsheets and saying what Harley and Hudson should sign for, I probably would have been looking at more. And also like why would either one have to sign now? Unless they really made it worth their while, because both those guys, let's say they have poor seasons, these deals would still be there, like at what they ended up signing for. So, but again, it's you don't operate in a spreadsheet. These are real people. They want to be part of the team. They want to show that commitment. It's a weight off to know you've got life-changing money for the rest of your life. So that's certainly an element that goes into in both those cases. But I think both these teams are down the road are going to look at these as really, really big value contracts. So when you see those analysis of the best value that players are getting per contract, I think those defensemen in particular are going to be on those lists for a long time.
Yeah, and I think the Players Association maybe doesn't love it, but like these players, sometimes, money isn't what drives them. And as long as they get a number that they're happy at, like I think the rest of it kind of takes care of themselves. I know.
I'm going to cut you off there because that's one of my things that drives me nuts. Why would the Players Association care what any one player gets when the players are getting 50% of league revenue? So if Lane Hudson takes $2 million less a
The
year,
bottom can eat.
that's $2 million for everybody else, right? I think certainly, in the olden days, that was a major factor. The association like really wanted to get the players up. They would even like coordinate the arbitration schedules to like what would help get players the most. But they get 50%, and like there was some reporting that the previous couple seasons the players actually didn't get 50%, and so the owners owe like a top up to everyone's pay for those seasons. So like even a Connor McDavid, he took less money than he could get, sure, but everyone else in the PA should be very excited because that's more money for the Oilers and across the league to get paid. So I need a buzzer because when I hear that, I want to always interrupt and say I don't think the PA, maybe they do care, but I don't think they should care what any one player makes.
Maybe it's the agents that care then because their commissions directly
Yes,
impact it.
of course. Of course. Yeah.
But yeah, then to your point too, like Dobson, right? Like he's making all that money, but he can't actually play on, power play one because Lane Hudson's patrolling power play one. They're on the same team. And so it actually like kind of impacts the offensive output that Dobson can get, where Harley like is going to be running power play one in Dallas. So I think that definitely plays in. Let's wrap this extensions part up real quick here. Just talking about Logan Cooley. So he's a guy, he got an 8-year, $10 million cap hit. It seemed like every day his value was getting higher and higher and higher until they got this deal done. So again, no clauses in the RFA years, 16 team no trade clause in years 5 through 8. He's got 12 points so far in 11 games this season, coming off 65 points in 75 games last season. So a little different than Harley. He's on the last year of his ELC, whereas Harley had signed a bridge deal. Any thoughts on this deal? And then also, it seems like people are saying that this could be a direct comparable for Adam Fantilli for his next contract.
Yeah, I think the structure of no signing bonuses, that's kind of like a carryover from the Arizona days, right? With this team where, I said earlier, like, why would a team care? Well, I think in those Arizona days, that was a team that did care because they didn't want to come up with the cash, right? And almost all those contracts had no signing bonuses and were backloaded because they figured they would trade them before they had to pay the bigger money. I guess so. Then you have this. Now you're in Utah. You have the financial resources, but you have a cap sheet where there's not many signing bonuses. I guess you can use it as a little bit of a lever and say that if you're going to start to give signing bonuses, maybe you want like a cap hit reduction or something. But it is still strange to see a player of this caliber and now a team that certainly has financial resources to not give signing bonuses. But I guess that's how they wanted to approach it. I'm surprised to see him sign an 8-year deal coming out of his ELC because we've seen a trend now where, especially the higher end guys, they're not signing those 8-year deals. They're signing the shorter deals, bridging, and then they can get back out to the market sooner. And the guy signing the 8-year deals would be like a Frank Nazar who had barely played any games. Where like, hey, who know? Yes, it's looking great, but that's a lot of money for playing only like a less than a season or a season or so. I totally get it on those guys, but I'm surprised to see Cooley sign for 8 years. Having said that, considering what he's done so far, and he's coming right out of his ELC, I think this is pretty. To me, it looks like pretty much market value. I don't necessarily think he's giving like he's taking a big discount or anything. The question would just be, yeah, if he signed a bridge, he could probably make more career earnings down the road. And again, maybe that's just not motivation. The motivation is to be part of this core and know that you're going to be there and growing with this team that certainly looks like they're going to be uh, buyers and getting a lot better over the coming years.
Yeah, and you look at that line that he's on this year, right, with Cooley, Gunther, and Peterka. They're one of the most fun lines in the NHL. They got Utah off to a blazing start. I think they're now 8-3. They're top of their division. So, really exciting team to watch, and just a fun player, and a guy I think who you said like maybe he could have got more, or like he could have done a bridge deal and then really got a bigger deal in a few years down the road. But maybe he's a guy who wants that long-term security and also really enjoys the message that Utah owner Ryan Smith and that management group has kind of set for them, moving forward.
For sure, yeah, and then again, that's part of it is like wanting to be part of the team, knowing like look at Necas. It's no surprise he got traded. He was signing short deals with Carolina every year, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to be part of the core and grow, you sign a long-term deal.
Definitely. Let's switch gears a little bit here. Just another like buzzy kind of NHL thing that people want to talk about between the injured reserve and the long-term injured reserve. And so I think the first thing I want to get your insight on here, Hart, is like just the kind of the difference between injured reserve and long-term injured reserve. I think a lot of that mostly has to do with just roster space and then like kind of the money. But then also we now have about, I think, 10 teams you said that are using LTIR this year, with another 3 teams that have players on long-term injured reserve but aren't necessarily using it for cap space. And so just talking through that stuff, like, and maybe some of the teams who had like optimal LTIR captures, and like just the difference this year between I know we did a video on Mark Stone and how he can't maximize it because he's not on season-ending long-term injured reserve. So talk through some of those nuances.
Okay, yeah, that's a big topic. So injured reserve provides no cap benefit or impact whatsoever. An NHL team can only have up to 23 active players, and active means that they're healthy and they count against that 23 roster count. So if you have players that are injured and you want to be able to have additional players on your roster, you put them on injured reserve, and so that means that they do not count against the 23 active player roster count limit. But again, they count against the cap, and there's no cap benefit for it. Player on injured reserve has to miss 7 days from when they last played. So, if Keith got injured in beer league last night, then even if like in 3 days from now they put you on injured reserve, that injured reserve goes back to when you last played, and like day one would be today, the day after you last
They're
played.
moving me to LTIR so I don't have to play anymore.
Season-ending, career-ending LTIR, maybe. And LTIR, we've talked about on different shows. It's a big topic. Everyone on LTIR counts against the cap. That's one of my other things. It's a big misconception. Everyone always counts against the cap. It doesn't take them off their cap. But when you're on LTIR, a team can potentially exceed the salary cap by an amount, which there's some calculations to that. So when you have a team that has lots of cap space, a player is injured for a long time, like a Patrick Laine with Montreal, for example, there's no LTIR discussion right now because they have lots of cap space, and so putting them on LTIR accomplishes nothing as a benefit, and there's actually some downsides because you're kind of like locked into some numbers if you ever actually could use him on LTIR. So again, players that are injured long term on teams with lots of cap space, they're not on LTIR. Certainly they could trade for players to get closer to the cap and then put the player on LTIR and use that benefit to exceed the cap. But otherwise, yeah, there's not much LTIR talk when you're under the cap. And then a team like Vegas, you brought up with Mark Stone. So That's the change this year from previous years with the new CBA. So because Mark Stone is expected to come back at some point this season, they only can exceed the cap by an additional 3.8 million when he's on LTIR. It used to be his full cap hit, and it used to be that he could then come back the first day of the playoffs, right? Well, now because he's going to come back, they only can exceed it by 3.8, so they get less benefit during the regular season. And as we've talked about, there's a playoff cap as well, where he would be charged his full cap on this playoff cap. So there really is no way that they could add all these extra players and then have him come back for the first game of the playoffs. So that's when I put out that Stone is on LTIR, we see a lot of replies. Oh, they're up to their old tricks again. Sure, he's going to be on LTIR every year. That seems pretty sure, but they don't get the same benefit that they used to, and there's less like opportunity to make people feel like they're getting away with something now with the new rules.
Yeah, I think that was the big misconception when Stone got put on right away. They're like, "Oh, here we go again. Vegas is gonna, exceed the salary cap by his full $9.5 million, and then he's gonna come back playoffs game one. They're gonna trade for some superstar, and like that's just not the case this year because of first the playoff cap, second the season-ending LTIR. Like I think those are the two big things. And it's gonna be interesting this year with the playoffs. Like there are going to be teams I think that are going to accrue cap space during the regular season that make moves, but then during the playoffs they might not be dressing necessarily their best lineup, but they're going to dress a lineup where they're cap compliant, and maybe there's like a $4 million defenseman that has to be scratched for a guy on an entry level or $1 million-ish because they have to be cap compliant.
Yeah, the teams that could, like a team that doesn't make any major additions or hasn't dealt with injuries, they wouldn't have an issue with the playoff cap. And we have some episodes where we went into the playoff cap rules and details, but it's basically just the 20 players that are dressed that count against the playoff cap. So those, like most teams, wouldn't have an issue with that. The teams where they could run into the issues like you talked about, it's where they do have injured players. So let's say it's a Mark Stone and he's out until the end of the regular season, and they use like that 3.8 million to add players. Depending on the roster composition, when he's going to play game one of the playoffs at his full cap it, yeah, that's where you may have to scratch a player just for cap space purposes in the playoffs. And the other one is if you accrue a bunch of space or build up a lot of cap space, you make some big additions, and at the trade deadline, again, because in the playoff cap, it's the full annual cap it that goes into the calculation, not how much the team took on when they at the point in the season when they acquired them. That's the other type of team that could have issues with the playoff cap. So right now, like we've added to the site projected playoff cap hit, and that's based on the projected lineup for the next roster. As you'd expect at this point, everyone would be cap compliant because you don't have injured players, or you don't have teams with injured players that made additions and now the injured guy's back, and you don't have anyone that's made a big acquisition. So for now, everyone looks fine on the playoff cap. But as we get later in the year and get those scenarios, that's where there could be some differences. And you can go on our Puck GM and play with the roster and see what the potential playoff cap hit would be for that roster.
Yeah, and interesting that you mentioned Puck GM. I think next Friday we're going to do a walkthrough with one of my pals in the hockey media space to kind of teach them how to use Puck GM so that all the fans who are fans of hockey and PuckPedia and want to be their own interactive GMs can make moves that are salary cap compliant, working within the rosters. So that'll be exciting. That's a teaser coming up. Let's wrap up this episode here, Hart. We're almost at time here with a Q&A. For everyone now, I think what we want to do is we want to get questions submitted to the show. You can reply to the tweet. I know this is live on Twitter, X, and then you also in the YouTube chat if you want to get in there and ask questions. And we'll have our producer, Seth, who's going to facilitate some of these questions. So just one question today that we're kind of going to go over, and that is on the topic of waivers. So a bunch of different variations of this question, but essentially people want to know for these waiver eligible players, if they kind of go through waivers and get claimed, what exactly is like their new waiver process for that player? If the team wants to send them down to the minors, do they have to go through waivers again? Does that team who then, put them on waivers first have first right of refusal to then take that player back? And then also too, I think there was some questions around Nico Dawes because he was a goaltender who got through waivers beginning in the season, but then the Devils had to call him up due to injury to Jacob Markstrom. But because of the CBA rules, he's 10 games and 30 days. He doesn't necessarily have to go through waivers when they sent him back, I think a couple days ago. So let's talk on waivers a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, waivers is definitely an area where we get lots of questions sent in. So when a team claims someone on waivers, they have not cleared waivers, which means this is a player that needs waivers to get sent down. So when a team claims the player, they cannot send them down. Like I said, because they've been on waivers, but they did not clear that because they were claimed. So so if the Rangers claim Keith on waivers, he's on their roster and he can't be sent down. Now, if the Rangers do want to put the player on waivers, so now the Rangers want to put Keith on waivers. The original team that lost him, they do not get any special like dibs or a right of first refusal or anything.
The Rangers basically put me on waivers already.
The waiver priority order is based on reverse order of the standing. So basically like last place to first. And so just because you lost the player, you don't get any special like spot on those rankings. The only special thing that the team that lost the player gets is if he goes back on waivers and the team that most recently lost him claims him, and there was no other claim put in. So teams that had they were lower in the rankings put a claim in that were unsuccessful. If that doesn't happen, then the team that lost him originally and claimed him back can send him right back down. And if you think about it, it's because like this player, he's been on waivers twice and only one other team claimed him the one time. It almost would be kind of mean if then the new team had to also put him back on waivers and have him pass through again. We saw that last year in training camp with Raph Lavoie between the Oilers and Vegas. And he was getting claimed back and forth because he couldn't be sent down unless the team that lost him didn't put a claim in. And there was a time when Edmonton claimed him back, but they couldn't send him down because there was a team that was lower than later than them in the waiver priority had also put in a claim, and that stopped the Oilers from being able to send him down. So when they wanted to send him down, they put him on waivers. Vegas claimed him back, and at that point, they were the only team putting a claim in, and that allowed him to go down. So that's
the Michael Scott snap, snip, snap.
Exactly. That's the only special thing that the team lost him has. There's also questions like when you claim a player on waivers, does he have to be on the roster a certain amount of time? Absolutely not. He could go on waivers again the next day. But again, to get a guy, if you claim a guy on waivers to get him down, you have to put him on waivers and he has to clear. And then the last part of your question. So when a player does clear waivers, so again, no one claimed him, he only needs waivers again when he's been on the NHL roster and played 10 games, or he's been on the NHL roster for 30 days of the season. And
this is an or, not an and.
It's
so
either
LTIR
or.
And this is or.
Yeah, this is or. And it's cumulative. So let's say Nico is up for 5 days, then goes back down.
One game and was maybe up
so
for
he was one game, and let's say he was up for 4 or 5 days.
Yep.
And then he's down for 2 more weeks and comes back up. Well, those clocks continue from there. So now he only needs to play 9 more games, or let's say it was 5 days before, 25 more days. And then, let's say he plays another couple of games and on the roster for a couple more days, goes back down again. Those counters kind of stop. And when he comes back up, they continue again. So it doesn't have to be like 30 days in a row or 10 games in a row. It's just as soon as once the guy clears waivers, he has hit either 10 games or on the NHL roster for 30 league days, then he would need waivers again to be sent down.
Perfect. There's so much nuance with all this stuff that the average fan can understand and comprehend, I'd say 70% of this, but then there's that 30% of it where you're like, I had no idea that existed. I didn't know that was even a rule. I even saw I forget what the rule was, but Steve Dangle was posting about something the other day where he was like, I had no idea this was even a thing. So I think these are people who watch hockey religiously, who know the game inside and out. And so I think it's good. And I think that's the reason why we have this show.
Exactly.
So we're going to be doing this every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, live on both X and YouTube. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube, go to our YouTube page. It gets posted all through our social media. Subscribe there. That's where you're going to find this. Set reminders. Do everything you want. But yeah, we're excited to do this, and definitely submit questions. Reply to these tweets. Post it. Think about it, and we'll have questions answered. And we'll keep going on through the topical NHL topics throughout each episode.
All right. Yeah, exactly. That's why we have the show. Send us the questions, and we'll try to cover them. And most importantly, Jays in 6.
Jays in 6. We'll see how that plays out. Thank you guys for all the time, and we'll see you next Thursday.
PuckPedia.com